My friend Jennifer sent this to me a few years back, and I've always used it on my networking talks because I really agree with it. It comes from a gentleman named Keith Ferrazzi, who said, the currency of networking is not greed, but generosity. And think about that. Giving of yourself, giving of your time, giving of your good, giving that quid pro quo, because if you believe you give good things, it'll come back to you. Now, networking, I suggest that it's just a formalization of behaviors that we have been doing as people all of our lives. You didn't sit there when you were a little kid and say, you know what, I'm going on the playground, I'm going to network today. No, you asked people maybe to play hopscotch or kickball or whatever when you were there in kindergarten, first grade. That idea of just reaching out beyond ourselves. Not everybody is comfortable with that. I want to give you some ideas, some strategies, and most important, some encouragement here. Because where you are today, I profess that there's a better you inside of you, a smarter you inside of you, a more powerful you inside of you. So I want to give you ideas, tools, strategies, techniques to come up another level, maybe or two. One of the greatest things I think about networking is what I call the serendipity effect. One of the greatest books ever written was The Three Princes of Serendip by Marcus Bach. And I can say that because I'm in a Unity church right now. Marcus is a Unity teacher, and there's a great audio series. I'm going to invoke sometimes the name of the man who built this church, the original senior minister here, Jack Bolden, because he was one of my teachers. This is a homecoming for me. Here at Renaissance Unity, I met my wife at a function here back in the Church of Today's Days. We were married in the sanctuary, and one of my daughters was baptized here. So I'm very familiar with the mindset. So if it's a first time here, let me tell you, this is a great loving community, a wonderful place. I've actually been to 23 other Unity churches throughout North America. I've been to Unity Village 4 times. But I'm not going to talk about the Unity movement except to say it really talks, a lot of my teachings this morning will be drawn from that kind of a principle. Serendipity. Marcus Bach's book is called The Three Princes of Serendip. So if you're looking for that, it's available probably either in the bookstore here or from the Unity bookstore. Let's think about the things that networking allows us to do. Number one, it allows us to meet new people in neutral settings. And what do I mean by that? Well, new people. Does everybody know everybody in the room here?
No.
Luther, you know everybody in the room here?
I do.
Okay. Well, you're the host. You get away with it. But think about it. You're coming together. Life. Who was it who said life is a contact sport? I'm trying to remember that quote. But life is a contact sport. Who you know, how do you refer people? Part of networking is introducing us to people we might not meet otherwise. Because oftentimes when we're in our area of expertise, we will sit there and talk to other people like us. But the one thing that's great about networking is you meet people who may be a little different than you are, and I mean different as they might not have the same careers track as you do, or they might have different ideas or experiences or talents to bring. And so that's one of the things that's nice about it. It permits us to introduce ourselves to new prospects as a person of expertise. I really believe at this point in our consciousness that everyone is an expert. I look back to when I was a kid. I went to a general practitioner, the same as my family, Dr. Whitehead. Now, Dr. Whitehead, everybody remember the actor George C. Scott? Always had the short brush cut haircut. He was a tough guy. Well, when I went to Dr. Whitehead, the movie Patton came out, and Dr. Whitehead bore a resemblance to George C. Scott. Trust me, seeing General Patton come in the door with a shot. But the reason I bring up general practitioners is about the 70s, medicine moved on. I went to a pediatrician. My mother went to an OBGYN. My father went to an internist. Those days of being a general practitioner, even in our fields, are no longer the norm. I'm sure you can be, but these days it's not just what you know and who you know, it's what you know that's unique to your value proposition. The other thing about networking, it creates social capital and business capital for both ourselves and our organizations. Along the line of being an expert in our field, that ability to say, this is the organization, this is my business, this is who I represented. So that serendipity effect, you never know what's going to happen until you show up. So the issue most people have, I find, with business networking, fear of rejection, fear of failure, inadequacy, poverty. You know, my God, I'm spending all this money driving around town, and you know, my gas tank's getting kind of low, and you know, I mean, there's all these people here, and some of them I know, and some of them I don't. Or, you know, what if they don't like me? They don't like me. Well, what I'm going to say to you is this. Douceur's #1 law of business networking is that fear is real. It's a real emotion. It's a real stimulus, a response to what's going on in your environment. However, some of the things that trigger it may be false. That false evidence appearing as real. Was anybody nervous when they came into the room today? Were they concerned? Not a reaction. Oh, okay. Thank you for being honest. The truth is we're all nervous when we go into things. What if? And oftentimes we project forward or we build on the experiences we've had. I mean, two people can walk into an event and have diametrically different experiences. One person can have opportunities and meet, and other people will kind of migrate to the corners and sit there and watch it like it's a bad reality TV show. But your experience is based upon what you believe, what you think, and your circumstances. For example, one of the things about, anybody read Seth Godin? He's a great business philosopher, SethGodin.com. The man is succinct. I need to learn how to be more succinct like Seth. But he will not use two words if one will do. So SethGodin.com, he's kind of a business philosopher, and he's just really an intuitive and sharp kind of guy. But he suggests that in one of his books about tribes, creating networks of like-minded organizations, people like yourself. I like to call it areas of influence. Because what happens is this. Part of our networks is general networking, and then I believe specific networking. Oftentimes, we think, okay, I'm going to meet a real estate agent or a chiropractor, or I'm going to meet an accountant or such like that in a general networking event. But oftentimes we forget it's important to also have networks of people who are like-minded to us, people who we can be a part of our community. So both of those, I think, are highly important factors in our networking. I know a business, and I'm going to talk about Ross Sillers and Image 3 Marketing in a little bit, but a lot of his business, he builds on partnerships, being able to support other people to grow their business and have services and capabilities that they don't have. So in your area of influence or in your tribe, you need to find successful people who speak your language, they understand what you're talking about. We all speak jargon, we all speak languages. As a writer, I use certain terms, or as a communications professional, I'll use certain terms that you as a holistic healer might not use. You might not know what I'm saying, but I can walk into a certain situation with people in my industry and show my validity and show my mastery of things, just basically understanding key concepts. The other thing we talked about, generosity and networking, that willing to give, get, and gain. That ability, because I really believe as specialists, there's things we don't want to do. As a writer, I don't like writing grants. I really don't. I don't mind writing training modules. I don't mind writing journalistic pieces or articles for publications. Right now, I do a lot of SEO, SEM work, but I don't necessarily, there aren't things I want to write. Right now, I'm taking a respite from what I call long form writing, because for about 3 years, my wife and I owned a printing and publishing company. And that's exhaustive writing, 35, 55, 100,000 words at a throw. You feel drained, and so I'm taking kind of a step back, but if a great book project came along, you know I'd be there in a heartbeat. The most important thing about your tribes is that bottom line is people who care beyond themselves. People who see their community, their industry, all those sectors moving forward as a result of that like-minded support. Now, oftentimes, that idea of who we are, when you're talking to people sometimes and you give them a compliment. Most people, I believe, cannot take a compliment or affirmation. Why? Well, we're told, be humble, be modest, be gracious. Well, I think that people need to notch it up a little bit. One of the things that seems to be really big in pop culture today is superheroes. You turn on the TV, you see TV shows, or you go to the movies, and they're based upon comic books. You know, Marvel, a new Marvel movie's coming out later in the spring. They have that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show on, Spider-Man, Batman. How many Batman, have they done, It's funny. You sit there, how many guys have played Batman? Keaton and George Clooney and Ben Affleck. Yeah, I mean, my God, so many different people have been Batman. Now, I like Ben Affleck too, but I really like George Clooney. I like every time people use my name and his in the same sentence, except when they look at me and say, "Who do you think you are, George Clooney?" But I'm going to make you a superhero. What do I mean by that? Well, I want to make you a superstar in networking and reaching out to people. I'm going to talk about your superpowers. Now, in the research I did for this, the idea is there is actually a website you can go to that cross-references all the major superheroes and their powers: telekinesis, time travel, strength, speed, all those different things. But as a networking, you need your own superpowers. What superpowers would you like to have? Well, let me suggest a few. Wouldn't you like to be able to place yourself in situations where you could access the right people to move forward? How about that ability to gain favor and reputation in your chosen area of pursuits? Maybe training yourself for future success, or working towards personally and professionally pleasing outcomes? Well, I say to you, you have those superpowers inside of you. And this can only be achieved by harnessing those abilities, those situations, shaping the outcome. In essence, if you think about superheroes in the beginning, suddenly they know they're different. Suddenly they have a little, when Peter Parker got bit by the spider, his life was definitely different after that. Or when Bruce Wayne realized something different about him. That idea, there was that epiphany point where their life wasn't the same, and they realized that they had special gifts and talents. Did they say, okay, now suddenly I'm the hero and all is good? No, they were awkward about it. And I suggest in networking sometimes we're awkward about it. I hear this is a little more seasoned group, but at the same time, if you suddenly walked into a forum of, say, C-level officers in major Fortune 500 corporations, you might be a little nervous about it. So, superheroes, their powers let them rise to the occasion. They recognize, realize, embrace, and then master those powers. So you have the same ability within you. Because the surest way to have that success you seek is to act like a superhero. Be brave, do good, be ready whenever you have to, be willing to be tested. Put yourself in places, though, where you can be successful. Now, you can't defy the laws of physics. One of the great things about superheroes is a lot of their powers are beyond themselves. They have ability to run really fast, or fly through the air, or be able to do the things that they need to do. I'm going to tell you right now, you're all going to be limited by the laws of physics. However, there are better laws that we're going to work with today. The laws of metaphysics, mind, thought, and action. That ability to challenge yourself and do better by the renewing of your mind. Be ye renewed by the renewal of your mind. So that idea there of
transformed by the
that's it, transform. I don't mind telling you, I'm a teeny bit nervous up here. I forgot to jot down the quote. It's one of those things, when you're in a situation like this, I hope I make this look easy. You know what? I'm nervous. I want to make sure that all of you get what you paid for today, and then some. So I'm going to give you a quick checklist here. 10 ways to get more things out of your networking experiences. One thing I mentioned earlier, show up. A lot of people talk themselves out of their good, and especially going into a room full of people. Number 2, be strategic. For some people, it makes sense to talk to a lot of different people. For some people, they need to talk to people in their industry, and for most of us, it needs to be a little bit of both. So fish in a pond that has fish in it. Well, one of the things that you can do is if you go to an event, if you know the organizers, the hosts, if you know Luther, say, Luther, I'm looking for this kind of decision maker. I know Luther well enough to know that he would bend over backwards to get somebody in here. If you said you were looking for this type of person, Luther would do everything in his superpowers to get that person in here for you. I mentioned fears. Have a budget. Some events do have an admission cost, or there is an expense. Obviously, you're going to have to pay the gas, maybe the admission. So have a budget when you network in mind. One of the low-cost, easiest things to do in the world is what I call soft networking. Charities, service groups, houses of worship, jobs clubs, any place where people meet up. And that ability there to just be in a room with people, talk to them, meet them. Sometimes it's nicer to do softer networking because you're in a more relaxed place. You're in a place where, excuse me, you're in a place where you're not sitting there stressed out about what you're trying to do. Instead, they can see who you really are, how magnificent actually you really are. The other thing about soft networking is, one of the things, especially here in the Midwest, is we're all very open people. If you go to the coasts, especially the East Coast, or if you go travel, people sometimes aren't as open. On my podcast, I interviewed a woman, and she talked about growing up here in Detroit, and then her travels took her to France, where she now lives with her husband. And she says, here in Myers, you're standing in the line, you get talking, something triggers a conversation, and within 2 minutes, you're seeing pictures of grandkids. Sometimes other places, they're not as warm. But that ability sometimes, have you ever just struck up a conversation with somebody? That's a form of networking. You never know. I met a woman 4 months ago. She was the gatekeeper, the admin for Continental Tevis, which is one of the tier 1 auto suppliers. We just had a tremendous time. We were talking, and I mentioned my daughter, who is Laura Jean, who is finishing up her degree. She's out at Oakland University, and she said if she's looking for an internship, have her call me, and I will get her in touch with the right person. Wow, what a tremendous offer was that. So that kind of networking situation does happen. So that kind of soft networking. One of the things that I like the two of you, you're here together. This kind of leads into my next point. When I was dating, they didn't have this term, but that idea of oftentimes you'll see people go out in groups. Why? Because oftentimes you'll have somebody who is seeking the favor of somebody they'd like to date, and then you have somebody who's called that wingman, wing girl, that person to kind of be there to make sure that perhaps the other person in that person's party have somebody to talk to. Well, in networking events, you can do that too. If you're going to somebody and you're saying, I don't like going to groups, or you know what, I haven't had success here, take somebody with you. That gives you the ability to have somebody to talk to, so that takes away a lot of that fears. Here's the technique I use with one of my friends is I'll look at this half of the room and I'll talk to, hey George, how are you? And then George and I will engage in conversation, and my friend will be talking over here and getting to know Kim. And then what will happen is we'll suddenly flip and say, oh, do you know Kim? Oh, do you know George? And suddenly we're kind of directing the flow of traffic. And you create a certain energy there that people say, well, who are these guys? And why are they talking to everybody? It works. It works. I'm telling you that. One of the things that happens in networking events is, well, looking at this group, I'm sure everybody remembers WKRP in Cincinnati. And remember Herb Tarlick, actor Frank Bonares played, bad plaids, and he was kind of sleazy, slimy, and he was always chasing Lonnie Anderson's character, Jennifer. Well, I see those people at networking events too. But they have that bad quality. You can tell the Herb Tarlicks of the world because they've got that thick stack of their business cards, and they're dealing them like a deck. Hi, George, how are you? You got a card for me? That's great. Tell you what, I'll call you next week. I'll help you with your project. I don't like those people either. Nobody does. But they're so focused on trying to get something out of the event. They're so focused on being able to tell their boss or their spouse's boss, whoever, that idea of being productive. Well, I'm going to tell you that does not work. Oftentimes at a network event, it's more about quality than quantity. It's better that you walk out of an event with 3 business cards of people that you want to have future relationships with, you want to talk to, who you feel really good about having spoken to, than if you walk out with everybody else in the room. Quality over quantity. Learn that lesson from Toby Cunningham. Toby is an independent video producer. Those of you who watched the Red Wings games in the 70s and 80s, he was the executive producer over there at Channel 50. Toby has a rule. You got to ask him for his business card. He's not going to give it up. And you know what? Sometimes that's what we need to be. Yes, we say, oh my God, here's my card, here's my card. But give people a chance to engage as part of your process. That's also a nice pre-screening tool. Sometimes if you're looking for, I'm going to give you now the opposite strategy of this, quantity over quality. Sometimes go into an event and play networking bingo. For people who have a product or service that has that ability to, transcend barriers, grab a Post-it note and make up a little scorecard on it. For example, more often than not, at most networking events, you're going to come across a financial planner, a mortgage banker or broker. You'll come across maybe a network marketer. You'll come across somebody who is an alternative healer. You'll come across certain other people. When you attend enough of them, you'll see that. Well, if you're the kind of person who needs quality and quantity of interaction, say, okay, did I meet the financial planner? Did I meet the mortgage broker? And just go through and make your own little list. And that will also give your mind, rather than sitting there, oh, well, I don't know, who should I talk to next? It'll also spur you on, oh my goodness, I didn't know there was a person who did that, or wow, they were on that list. So that's one of the things that you can do. And also ask the host, say, I'm looking specifically for these kinds of people. I mentioned wingman or winggal. The other thing about it is be the icebreaker. If nothing else, a lot of people are so nervous. Be that person who shakes hands, says hi, and looks and say, hi Jerry, I'm Dean. How are you today? Oh, you're with Primerica? Okay, very good. So you're in financial services. Great. How do you like it? That kind of engage him in the process, or her. Focus on your own message. Now, oftentimes we hear elevator speech, and we've all heard that. If you and Donald Trump were in an elevator and you both got on and he was going to the top of Trump Towers and you were going to, this is your chance to blurt everything out. Well, it isn't. I'm going to tell you right now, more is not more. I'm going to suggest maybe you focus your message and have something that's concise. And what do I mean by concise? At the end of the interaction, you want to leave people with an idea. I am a who specializes in what? Because most people can't think about more than 3 things at a time. If you say that, when I work for Image 3 Marketing, I say, I'm a writer who helps people get found on the internet. And if you know anybody who's got a business, and they've spent money on Google AdWords, and they've got SEO and SEM, and sometimes it doesn't work in quite the way they like. So to tell somebody, I'm a writer who helps people get found on the internet, that leads to a lot of good, real conversations rather than sitting there throwing a bunch of cliches at people. So leave people with that one dominant impression in mind. I remember once I was in a room like this and we were talking, and there was this gentleman, and I understand his motives. He basically said, well, I don't want to leave money on the table. I want them to know that I can paint barns, and that I can fix their car, and that I can do all these things. And the facilitator looked at him and said, what is it that you want people to really know about you? And he said, well, I don't know. I said, no. And we looked at him, and we kind of worked with him to focus his message, because what happened was, I mentioned fear earlier. He was so concerned. He wanted to provide for his family. He was a good-hearted guy. But geez, he was so concerned about leaving money on the table, he was pushing opportunities away. So one of the things I tell you is, as part of your networking process, learn how to distill your wisdom down to a sentence, maybe a sentence and a half. And then be a little bit engaging about it. Sit there and let people wonder, why did you say that? Or how about that? That little air of mystery, because that's going to invite better communications. And that leads me into the next point, skill with questions. Now, I like